Hello everyone and welcome to this video about how to buy a house. Full disclosure, am a first-time potential home buyer, but I've learned a lot along the way here from friends, and my realtors have fortunately been pretty patient with me. So I thought I could share some of that knowledge because some of it is not especially intuitive, right? Like if you happen to be able to do the math of how much it will cost to own a home, you probably don't fully understand the order in which to do things, right? So I'm starting with a basic overview of the math, but then I'm going to go into at least in my part of the United States, what's an acceptable order of operations when it comes to buying. So the basics of the finances of buying a house is down payment. Where are you getting that money from? How much is it going to be? And um, the mortgage payment, right? You should, if it's not factored in already, when you're thinking about it, factor in property taxes, uh, an estimate of property taxes, and maybe even, depending on how fast values are growing in your area, you may have to assume for a year-over-year increase in property taxes. Maybe you live somewhere where that's likely not going to be a problem, so you can just kind of hand wave it because it'll be a small enough amount of money. It's not a big deal. Um, and with owning a house, if you've experienced an apartment so far, it also usually comes with extra utilities like garbage, recycling, extra heat and AC costs, water. Maybe you change the internet provider and your new one costs more, whatever the case is, but there's often some degree of additional utility costs that you'll have to guess at. Um, and what those are depends so much on your area that I can't really even venture a guess to try and help, but it does vary a lot from one area to the next. So I'm going to talk now a little bit more about the down payment though. The down payment affects a lot of things. It can, if you're in a highly competitive market, the market I'm in is extremely competitive and I hate it. Um, but if you're in a competitive market, something like a larger down payment in a purchase agreement or can maybe lend a little bit towards like, oh, well, this buyer's okay, right? Because one of the things that they're trying to do, again, I hate this, but one of the things that sometimes sellers try to do in a very competitive market is evaluate how likely you are to have to back out of the deal due to a lack of financing. So if you have a high down payment and a low interest rate in your purchase agreement, that is an indicator of your financial stability. So that can give you an advantage. Again, it's kind of a crock of crap because basically you're saying, well, you already have a bunch of money, so I'd prefer you spent it over somebody who maybe needed the space more. But that's the world we live in. So again, that's maybe an advanced portion of a basic topic, but it's not just funding the down payment, right? It's deciding how much down payment you can or should aim for. Do you want to avoid the extra mortgage insurance? I think that's what it stands for. PMI is the acronym. By putting 20% or more down on the house, is that worth it for you? There's a lot of considerations with the down payment. And so with more advanced stuff, I know there's so much to buying a house, but there are some more advanced things that a lot of people don't necessarily think about. You know, we're all taught that house values just always go up, which makes them a great investment. No, 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 no. That's not how that works. That's not even kind of how that works. The average house value in the United States actually drops when you factor in how much money is spent on capital improvements and property taxes, which is basically the cost of owning space. So, uh, there, with the average value dropping, um, but you know your value dropping relative to expenses, you have to be especially cognizant of areas where maybe the whole value of the neighborhood or the region, or maybe it's 2006 and you're buying a condo in Miami, right? Like, there are things that just drive house neighborhoods and markets down. And if you have a plan to have this as a 2, 3, 5 year house and things go south on you, you could end up stuck there. But if you plan for that and allow for it, maybe you'll be better off. Who knows? And then there are different kinds of houses that need more work than others over time. So there are some styles of kitchen, some colors of flooring, some types of carpets that just last forever, right? They physically last a long time and stay in good shape, but also in style, they last a long time. They're relatively timeless, right? Like uh, our grandma's floral patterned couch didn't age very well in terms of style. It may have lasted forever physically, but it didn't last very long in terms of style. Something more muted from that area would have probably, or era, would have probably lasted better than such a bright floral pattern that a lot of us probably have a mental image in our head right now of it. Um, so some stuff lasts long and some stuff doesn't. And you can try to guess. You can just pay attention, and that's all you're doing, right? Is trying. And then there's also different types of emergencies that can come up with owning a house, such as water running into your basement, or a storm tearing the roof off, or needing a new water heater, air conditioner, furnace, new major appliances in the kitchen, all sorts of things like that. In your region, you have to assess how likely those are to come up as something that are must fixes, right? Something that you have to deal with. And that may affect how much money you're willing to spend on the house, depending on how old some of that equipment is. But it may also impact how much you feel comfortable with as life savings, or emergency savings, I mean. So maybe you want to increase your emergency fund before you get into a particular house because there's more risk of equipment going wrong that costs you more and could stack up bad on bad on bad on bad, right? So that is one way, or one of the things. These are a few of the things that can get hidden when you're thinking about buying a house. And there's tons of other stuff. There's closing costs and maybe extra insurances on loans, or all sorts of things that can really add to the overall cost, or the level with that you need to bring of preparedness to buying a house. So this is something that I couldn't really find good detail about anywhere online, is the order in which that you should do things. I just didn't know, right? And fortunately I had some friends who could kind of help me through what they did. But the first thing I'd recommend doing is going to open houses or studying listings, right? Because if you can't find something you like for a price that you can afford, you're kind of SOL. In that case, I don't necessarily have any advice for you, because that's such a tough place to be in, and there's often not a lot you can do about it. But I'd start there, right? Just doing a little bit of research on your own, making sure that you're ready, that you can handle whatever's going on in your local housing market, things like that. Then I would get at least one mortgage pre-approval from wherever, somewhere easy, right? Somewhere where you don't have to do a whole ton of paperwork, like maybe you already have an account with the National Bank and you can just click approve me for mortgage, please, somewhere on their website, right? They're not going to get you the best deal by any means. It'll probably be a terrible deal. But that's easy to get a pre-approval, and then you can talk to a realtor And you can start talking to a realtor first, but they'll often ask you if you give them a budget. They'll often ask, where is this budget coming from? And part of what they're getting at is, do you have mortgage pre-approval? Do you know you can, somebody else has told you you can afford this house, right? Um, so, and they do that also in part because they want to make sure you're serious because realtors really make money off of commission of selling a house. So if you're not serious, then they aren't going to want to spend a ton of time with you, right? And circling back to mortgage pre-approval for a second here, as well as it being the next topic, whatever they approve you for, that doesn't mean that's your budget in general. I've seen so many cases where somebody, no matter how I do the math, I can only figure out that somebody can afford half the house they can get a mortgage for. And it's like when they're approving a mortgage for such a high value, for such a long term, it's like a bank or the lender or whoever wants this individual to fail so that the bank ends up with the house and the individual is just out a ton of money at the end of it. So be extremely careful. Don't just say, oh, well, I make $20,000 a year and my lender approved me for a $400,000 house, even though I only have $1 extra a month in my budget. That's that's not how it works. Don't do it, man or woman. Don't do it, or anything in between. Whatever. Just don't do it. Whatever you are, whoever you are, however you identify, none of it matters except that you don't do it. So, that is something where people can get kind of misled. For example, I'm one of those, right? I was lucky enough to not get misled, but I got approved for a stupid mortgage. And all I could think was, how in the heck? I couldn't even figure out. It almost perfectly matched my take home pay in a given month. How in the world are they expecting me to manage that? I got an autoimmune disease that makes bread expensive. Where do you think that I'm getting that kind of money? So it's pretty common for that to happen, and just pay attention. Don't overstretch yourself, or you'll end up in a really bad place. So then, moving forward with the mortgages instead of looking back now, apply for a bunch of pre-approvals, right? If you apply for enough of the, or for a lot of them in a fairly small amount of time, it doesn't hurt your credit that much, if at all. And credit scores are kind of a sham anyway. But that can be a way to get a better idea of rates. So my personal favorite was, we've got a few local co-ops here. They all had great rates compared to national banks or local brick and mortar classic banks, right? Like our in my area, the co-ops were just better than everyone else. And it can take you some time to get your best rate, right? But a small percentage difference can make a huge difference over the lifetime of your mortgage. So it's worth doing. And once you've done a couple of them, you really get used to what kind of information they want. So while you're doing all of that, keep meeting with the realtor about specific houses as you're able. And you can keep going to open houses too, right? You're just continuing to learn your likes and dislikes and understanding your housing market. And in a market like the one I'm in, that's extremely important because any house here less than about 270 or so thousand dollars, if it's a decent deal, will sell in less than 24 hours. So you often have to be on top of things. You'll have to message your realtor with a link to a house that you found when you rolled out of bed, right? Or maybe even before you rolled out of bed, just checking your phone. And it's hard to do that if you don't know what you're interested in. And maybe your realtor will come back with you and say, I don't know about this one. And that's fine, right? You have to have that fairly aggressive discussion, and most realtors will understand your situation and help you if that's what your market is like. It's realtors' jobs to help you. If you don't feel as if your realtor is helping you, find a different one. And depending on the level of unhelp, you might actually have a lawsuit. For example, my realtors described themselves with paperwork to me as fiduciaries. And the word sounds funny, but a fiduciary basically means that to a legally verifiable degree, they are supposed to be acting in my best interest. So, if your realtor is registered in that way, and I don't know what it's like in every state, or even really outside of my neighborhood, but that's something to pay attention to, right? Is trying to make sure that they're really acting in your best interest. So, I know it's a quick shotgun, but I'll see you guys in the next one.